I've been the best ever since day one when I walked into this company, and I've been vilified and hated since that day because Paul Heyman saw something in me that nobody else wanted to admit. That's right, I'm a Paul Heyman guy.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. As many of you know, DC Comics made a big announcement last week regarding Jon Kent's Superman becoming a bisexual LGBTQ representative character within Superman Son of Kal-El #5. Not shockingly, the widespread publicity and the idea of Superman being an LGBTQ plus representative at DC Comics has created interest or garnered interest in the character. And it turns out that the sales orders for issue number 5 have been unprecedented according to DC Comics. I'm going to get into the details, and that won't take too long, but there's some second, third, fourth order effects that I'm going to talk about that are kind of lying beneath the surface, where while this in the near term is absolutely great news, certainly great news for the retailers. They could always use some big hits and people coming into the shops and ordering books. But long term, this could spell some real trouble for not only for DC, but for Marvel. And we'll kind of talk about it more broad with both of them. But as I mentioned, DC Comics announced on their webpage, following the news of the upcoming reveal of Jon Kent coming out as bisexual in issue number 5 of Superman Son of Kal-El, global fan excitement has led to more orders for the upcoming issue than the series' debut issue, which I guess that's what the unprecedented nature of the sales are. Of course, we don't exactly know what the sales for Superman Son of Kal-El #1 from Tom Taylor were. I imagine they're actually probably quite robust. I would be surprised if they were under 80,000. Main Superman title, kind of replacing Clark Kent, plus a pretty well-established, well-known comic creator in Tom Taylor on the title. So I imagine like it probably wasn't low. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that the sales for Superman Son of Kal-El #1 were likely under 40,000. So I imagine, just my guess based on what they're saying here with no actual definitive information regarding the sales of issue number 1, that issue number 5 probably has orders well over 100,000. There's a really good chance of that. I know they've already gone to a second printing that is actually going on at the exact same time as the first printing, because FOC came not too long before or right after the announcement. And of course, people have come in and they have wanted the book. So we've had retailers reach out to Lunar and essentially ask for more copies. So they've gone to a second printing. DC Comics has also announced, and I've heard this from Larry's Comics. Larry said as soon as he got word about the upcoming reveal of Jon Kent, obviously that was spoiled by Ethan Van Sciver, that he went out and ordered every single issue of Superman Son of Kal-El #1 and 2 that he could get, because he knew they were going to end up being hot properties, kind of hot commodities on the speculator market. Turns out he was absolutely correct that the first 4 issues of Superman Son of Kal-El are going to a second printing, and fans can place their orders at the local comic shops for each of the single issue reprints, which will now feature a DC Pride logo on the covers. The FOC for those are October 20th with an in-store date publishing of November 23rd. That is good news. Anything that garners interest in the books and actually sells and moves some units is absolutely good news. But there's a little bit, if you think about this is absolutely a marketing gimmick, and it worked. Shockingly, that if you take Clark Kent and put him on another planet and you replace him as Superman on Earth with his son Jon Kent, and then you decide to announce to the world, of course, normies out there don't realize that there's a difference between Clark Kent Superman or Jon Kent Superman. You just say Superman is coming out as bisexual. That would create a large amount of interest in the character and the story in which it happens. Not surprising that this would be the case. But we've already seen diminishing returns on a lot of the marketing gimmicks that Marvel and DC have been doing for years, and they're becoming more rapid. We heard from Dan Didio before he was relieved of duties as the publisher, and I think he was the chief creative officer, co-publisher and chief creative officer at DC Comics, that the reason that they were having to increase prices was because the readership was decreasing. They were having to make up for lost readers with increased prices. Now, increased prices are absolutely not a marketing gimmick. Issue number 1000s and stuff like that, you could even debate. But, comics have always done things with milestones. But variant covers have absolutely become a necessary marketing gimmick, not only for Marvel, for DC, for Image, really all publishers. When you look at the sales of a Berserker #1, absolutely buoyed by the #1 in 1000 variant cover you could get signed by Keanu Reeves. Ended up with sales or ship comics sold to retailers over 600,000. We look at King Spawn #1 sales, I believe, right around 500,000. Absolutely gimmicked to hell because you had that CGC observed Todd McFarlane signed 1 in 250 variant cover. Very hot commodity within the speculator and collector's market. So retailers end up buying a bunch of copies that they can't sell. So they're having to more rapidly go to these marketing gimmicks, more rapidly reboot titles so you can have #1s and you can claim that something big's going to happen. And the cycle just gets faster and faster. The event gimmick isn't working nearly as well because Marvel's the main culprit, because they do so many events simultaneously that there really is no fallout, or there's no major status quo change that you would expect, or at least in the past you would have expected from a major event comic, like a Crisis on Infinite Earths, which changed essentially everything. Or even we can go to like Civil War. Certainly changed a lot of things. We saw the fallout in Captain America, saw some fallout in Iron Man, and titles like that. You go to Civil War 2, where the event cycle has truncated. It's sped up. There's no real status quo change, a lot less interest, and essentially the event bombs. And people have less and less faith in these events, which absolutely have become marketing gimmicks rather than the culmination of years of work to where we've been working to this moment. Now let's execute it. Everybody's going to come in because they've been waiting for it to happen. Nobody's been waiting for Empire to happen. No one was waiting for Ten of Swords to happen. And nobody's waiting for Reckoning War to happen. It's just happening. So they're getting less bang for their buck on events. They're having to gimmick harder on their variant covers. And what happens when you do these things more rapidly? The customer or the fans, they get used to it. The novelty wears off. Ooh, wow, a cool 1 in 250 variant cover. I've seen that before. Do something different. Oh, a 1 in 1000. Actually, that little marketing gimmick actually ran people off because the comic books were priced at 1,000 on day one. Of course, I guess if you throw a Keanu Reeves autograph on there, people are a little bit more determined to get their hands on it. And what we're seeing now, what DC Comics is having to do to generate interest and really increase sales, and we're going to see this more, is a marketing gimmick like what they've done with John Kent, Superman, son of Kal-El. You're like, well, this is long-term planning. It's not long-term planning. Tom Taylor himself admitted it in his interviews when he talked about the reasons that he decided to take the character of John Kent in this direction. Was he thought it would be a missed opportunity if he were to write Superman and not include him as an LGBTQ plus character, because he had other stories in the past, essentially declined, and he didn't want to do another great white savior type comic book character. Funny enough, he's the great white savior of comic readers, I guess. He gets to take the characters. He's the great white savior that gets to change them for everybody, which I think is ironic. But that's a video for another day. Now, I'm sure, as you can tell, DC Comics were very happy about this. They were able to do a press release. They were able to get the information out there, and they were able to get the book on a second printing before it's ever even released to comic book shops. And sales have absolutely increased, according to DC Comics and their website. Unprecedented sales. That leaves a lot of leeway, considering we don't know what the actual sales for the very first issue were. My guess is that they were at a minimum 80,000, but I could be wrong. Maybe they were 50. Either way, they saw an increase at issue number 5, which they normally wouldn't say. Normally in today's market, you would release issue number 1 with about 40 variant covers. DC's normally a little bit more conservative with the variant covers. Maybe it's 8 or 9 in comparison with Marvel. You see the big sales at number 1. You normally see about a 50 to 67% decrease in sales by issue number 3, and then kind of levels out. Then depending on the quality of the book, perhaps it levels out and stays there and plateaus, or it keeps sinking because the writing quality isn't very good. Marvel and DC have already ran off readers with their constant reboots of their universes. They've already ran off readers with their insistence on doing all these variant covers. DC used to only do them for issue number 1s and milestones. They do them pretty much for every issue now. And if you're a completionist and you want to, if you're an Iron Man completionist and you got Iron Man number 1 coming out with 44 covers, you could be a little bit upset. Then you see at issue number 7, it still has 5 covers. You know what I mean? So they've they're driving long-time comic book readers away. Dan Didio already, explained that they had to raise prices to make up for the lost readership. And now they have a gimmick that's actually being more effective, at least in the short term, whereas the event cycle, less effective, the variant cycle, less effective, the reboot cycle, less effective. These things, these marketing gimmicks that they've been using in the past to kind of make up for the loss of readership. As they continuously change the essence of the characters, what they stand for, the core components of the characters and what they represent to the comic book reader, people are going to start stepping away. Of course they are. They're going to get kind of fed up, and they say, you know what, I've stuck around long enough. This is the last major change of this character that I don't particularly agree with. I need to walk away, which in the short term is no big deal because this marketing gimmick has worked. It has brought people into the store and they're going to buy their comic. The problem is that comic books, the way that they're released right now, don't really fit into the consumer habits of modern, especially younger people. Now, there are certainly younger comic book readers that have fallen into the hobby and love the medium. I think it's the best storytelling medium in the entire world. I don't think it's being used to its fullest right now by a lot of creators, but I firmly believe this. And I do like the monthly release schedule, that you have this really ongoing, epic sagas that sometimes interconnect for these bigger kind of stories that are being told, and that they're kind of evergreen and they never end. Of course, they do end now, but that's kind of the thought behind it. And you tell the story in episodic, and for the most part, they're a villain of the week kind of story until something big happens that you've been working through with subplots, and then you execute it, and it brings a lot of people in, and people are really excited when you get like a Dark Phoenix or something like that. They don't really do that anymore. A lot of comic writers actually write graphic novels, and they release them 1/6, 1/8 at a time now, which makes comic book reading kind of frustrating, especially if you were a new reader. You come in and you're like, I didn't read a complete story. I read a very small fraction of a story. Why would I want to continue coming back? No, not knowing that the next issue, I'm actually going to get to complete the story. And a lot of times I can firmly guarantee a new comic book reader, you will not get the end of the story. The next issue, you're probably going to have to stick around at least 5 issues, and sometimes even up towards like 8 or 9. So I think a lot of the new people that are coming in, and I hope a lot of new people come in and buy Superman Son of Kal-El number 5. We need more people in the comic book hobby, in the community, if we're going to support this hobby and ever have any type of growth that they're seeing, within manga. Or they're just going to have to fundamentally change the way that they publish their books. But I don't think a lot of people, if they've never read a comic book and they're very excited to see the first kiss of Superman within a DC comic, once they read it outside of that event that they bought it for, they're not going to find it a really satisfying experience, especially since Tom Taylor's writing it, and I guarantee you he is not going to write that as a full, complete story. So as you're driving long-term readers away because you're not really using the medium to its fullest, you're making wholesale changes to the lore that's been established for 80 years, with DC and Marvel. I guess you could say 80, but it's more like 60. Really, Marvel as we know it today really kind of started in 1960. And then you're making a lot of these changes to characters. You're constantly killing them off. You're constantly replacing them, and you're driving the people that have been supporting the industry for a long time away. But you're replacing them in the short term with a gimmick like this. But if they don't stick around, you're going to have to more frequently go to a gimmick like John Kent coming out as a bisexual character. But where do you go from John Kent Superman? Clark Kent Superman, maybe? Batman. You've already had a Robin come out. We've had a Green Lantern. Wonder Woman, Diana Prince has already been bisexual or has been portrayed bisexual, for years now. Not all the time, but certainly has happened in the past. So they're going to have to come up with new ways of making changes like this, or you have to go to bigger characters. Unfortunately, they've gone so big with this very first one that's been very successful, that's going to be harder to eclipse it unless you do Batman himself. So you're going to have to do more outlandish and crazier changes to the characters and the lore so that you can get your press release. Everybody that does, the people that don't read the comic books that might be interested in being like, yes, I want to support this happening in DC Comics, even though I'm never going to support DC Comics after this, and bring them in. And as we've seen with the cycles of reboots, the more frequent use of variant covers and events and whatnot, they're going to have to go to this well more and more frequently as they continuously drive readers away in the long term. So this is very much a short-term game plan. And I can guarantee you a retailer like Larry or a retailer like Yule Carter are reaping the rewards of this and are probably pretty happy about this today. But in 6 months, if you drive away 5% of your longtime loyal Superman readership and you didn't replace them with anyone because this format and the storytelling medium doesn't fit the people that came in to see Superman Son of Kal-El #5, you've done the industry in itself just a great disservice, and actually the retailers. So these short-term plays that they've been doing more and more frequently, and this is just the next one, the next marketing gimmick that they're going to use. And if we know anything about DC and Marvel, they're going to go to it more and more frequently. They're going to burn this thing out to the ground to where there no longer will be any novelty or anything special about making a change like this, because they'll go to the well too often, and then they'll just burn that out, and they'll just have to do something more drastic that'll generate more headlines to actually make up for the people as they're driving them out for these short-term games, in my opinion. So the sales numbers for Superman Son of Kal-El #5 look very good. And I'm happy for my retailer friends, and I want them to be very, very successful and make a lot of money. And I hope I don't have to like every single comic book or every single angle that is played by the comic book industry. I hope this is successful. I hope some of the people that are brought in with Superman Son of Kal-El stick around and support the hobby long term on more titles than just that one. In fact, it needs to be more than the people that DC Comics are driving away and Marvel Comics are driving away when they're doing these types of changes. I just have no faith that that's what's going to happen, because that isn't what has been happening for the last 15, 20 years within comic books. So we are getting to a point of no return, right? Where DC and Marvel have actually driven so many customers, the loyal fan base that have been propping and maintaining the stability of the publishing for the last 10, 15, 20 years. As they drive them out, they're going to have to keep going to these gimmicks, these variants, these higher price points and whatnot. And they're going to have to keep doing big gimmicks to make up for the loss of those customers. Eventually, the bottom's going to fall out, and there's going to be no one left, right? There's not going to be a marketing gimmick left big enough for them to make up for the enormous pit of the vacuum that's just sitting there, unoccupied by consistent, loyal readers for DC and Marvel, as they continuously let them down and make wholesale changes, not only to their characters, but their universe. That's my opinion. I imagine I'm going to hear from some retailers, and I'm going to hear from some of the viewers that have a wholesale different opinion on this than I do. I welcome that. I'm here for the discourse. I'm here for fun conversations. I could be wrong on this one, but I have a feeling I'm giving you spoilers, not predictions. You know what I'm saying? The bottom is absolutely going to drop out unless DC and Marvel can do something to stabilize the industry and have people coming in for the stories rather than the spectacle that is their marketing gimmicks these days.